I had just moved into my first apartment, a small but cozy place on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, but it was mine. At night, the world outside fell silent, too silent. The kind of silence that made me hyper-aware of every creak, every gust of wind, and every noise I couldn't explain. It started as something small, just a faint tapping on the window. Probably just the wind, I told myself. But then the tapping came again the next night. Only louder, more deliberate. I brushed it off as coincidence, until the morning I noticed muddy footprints beneath my bedroom window. Footprints that didn't match my shoes. I told myself there was nothing to worry about. I locked my doors and windows, double-checking before bed. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling. Because what if someone was watching? And what if tonight, they decided to come inside? The next night, I stayed up late, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. It was past midnight when the tapping returned. More insistent this time. I froze, my eyes darting toward the window, curtains drawn tight. The tap, tap, tap turned into a slow scraping sound like nails dragging across the glass. Harponadong. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. But then it stopped, just as suddenly as it began. I convinced myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. But sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. It was my neighbor, an older man who had lived in the building for decades. He mentioned seeing someone standing in my yard last night. A man just standing there, staring at my window. He thought it was a friend of mine, but I live alone. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it really was just a misunderstanding. I told myself there had to be an explanation. But when I stepped outside that afternoon to check the yard, I found something else. A cigarette butt, freshly smoked, on the ground just outside my window. I don't smoke. That's when the dread started to settle in. Someone had been there, close enough to stand beneath my window and watch me. But why? The following night was worse. I woke up to a loud crash coming from my kitchen. My heart raced as I slowly climbed out of bed, gripping the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy lamp. As I crept down the hall, every shadow seemed to move. The crash had knocked a chair over, but no one was there. At least, not that I could see. The back door was locked, but I could feel the air was colder than usual. Had I forgotten to secure the window? I checked every lock again and tried to convince myself it was my imagination. But something didn't feel right. I stayed awake until dawn, but I could feel eyes on me. I didn't know from where, but I was sure of it. I decided it was time to call the police. They came, took a report, and promised to patrol the area. But they found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of anyone lurking around. Could be a prank, they said. But they advised me to stay vigilant. That night I sat by the window, lights off, waiting. The hours dragged by. Just when I was about to give up and go to bed, I saw him. A shadowy figure, lurking at the edge of my yard. He stood there, motionless, watching my window. I froze, heart racing, as he slowly lifted his hand and pointed directly at me. He didn't move. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity. I didn't dare turn away, afraid he'd disappear the second I blinked. And then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he turned and walked into the shadows. When the police came, they found no sign of him. I showed them the footage from my new security camera, but all it captured was a dark, blurry figure. Nothing that could identify him. They told me it was likely just a trespasser or a prowler, someone trying to scare me. But this didn't feel random. I couldn't sleep that night. Every shadow seemed alive. Every noise amplified. I thought about leaving. Just packing up and going somewhere. Anywhere. But I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. It was 2 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of my door handle jiggling. I bolted upright, clutching the knife I had started keeping by my bed. The door swung open with a low creak, and footsteps echoed down the hallway. I tiptoed to my closet, heart in my throat, and hid, peering through the crack in the door. I saw him. The intruder. The man from the yard. His face obscured by a hood. He walked through my apartment, touching my things, lingering over my photos. And then he stopped, turned, and looked directly at the closet. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I gripped the knife tighter, ready to defend myself if he opened the door. But after a long, agonizing moment, he turned and walked away. I stayed frozen in the closet until the first light of dawn. The police found evidence that someone had been living in my attic for weeks. Old food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and a notebook filled with my name over and over again. They never found him, and I moved out that very day, leaving the apartment and the nightmare behind. But as I unpacked my boxes in my new home, I found something that sent chills down my spine. A single, muddy footprint by my front door. Even now, I can't explain what happened, or why. Was it a random act of terror, or did he choose me for a reason? I replay those nights over and over in my head, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Was there a moment I missed? A chance to stop him before he got inside? The worst part is not knowing where he is now. Did he find a new target? Or is he still watching me, waiting for the right moment to return? They say you're supposed to feel safe in your own home. But after that, I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe again.